I don't feel in any way prepared for April, but at least my reading journal is set up. It's been really fun this year trying out monthly setups in my reading journal because previously I haven't used them. And while I have been making tweaks and changes with each subsequent setup, it's been nice to see that the layouts that I thought I was going to use, I am still mainly using, even if they don't necessarily look exactly the same month to month. The one we're setting up here is effectively like a monthly summary page, which just shows when I was consuming different pieces of media. So which days did I actually read the books that I read this month? Which days did I watch a TV show or a movie or anything like that? One of the issues that I've had with my previous iterations of this setup though is not having enough spaces for the different media pieces I'm consuming. In February, I ended up having to include a tip-in to include an additional 4 pieces of media, and because I set up March before I had to add that tip-in to February, I have a sneaking suspicion that March is going to have the same problem. To try and safeguard myself against that, I've added a couple more additional columns onto the kind of vertical portion that we have here, because the way this layout works is that each of the columns that go beside the numbers I've written out are for each individual piece of media, whether that's a book, a movie, a TV show season, anything like that, and then I can color in the box next to whichever day number to say that I did some consumption of that piece. So for instance, column A might be a book that I'm reading, and if I read that on the 1st, 3rd, and 26th, then I can color in the little box beside those numbers. I don't expect that I would go quite so long without having read the book, but hopefully you kind of get what I mean. My original version of this tracker looked quite similar to what other people typically have in their reading journal, which is effectively a calendar grid where they go and mark in or highlight the days that they started all the way to when they finished reading a book. But I wanted mine to give me a more accurate representation of how long it actually took me, because some days I don't read. So in that example, I would have said, oh yeah, I took from the 1st to the 26th to read the book, but it actually only got read over 3 reading sessions. The section with the second line highlights that's going down the left-hand side, this is where I write in what the piece of media is though. Notably, each of the columns are just capped off with an initial, so A through P, but I want a way to refer to what each of those letters actually represents, and that's what I'm going to be writing in that left-hand column. Even with the decoration down the bottom, I do technically have a little bit of extra space if each of the pieces of media takes up 1 line, which means I'm kind of giving myself a little bit of buffer just in case there are any titles that are particularly long and do need to go across multiple lines. So far with the structures I've used previously, I haven't had to, but I also had a wider amount of space available, so I'm hoping it'll be enough space. In terms of the theme though, you can see I'm going fairly autumnal with this, and that's because where I'm based in New Zealand, we are slowly moving into fall. Right now though, it is actually super hot in my office, still very much feeling like summer, so I'm just kind of like trying to manifest the cooler weather, I think. That, and it also relates to the read theme that was chosen for our book club in April, but more on that in a bit. In terms of timing, the April and media page took about 8.5 minutes to set up. That time though doesn't include any idea generation time or pre-planning time, so effectively just the stuff that you see in the video. The easiest way for me to be able to tell how much time a layout takes to set up is the filming of it, but on the right hand side of this layout, this is what I call my challenge accepted page. It's just a way to summarize the different pieces of media I'm going to be consuming or aiming to consume in order to meet the challenges that I undertook for the year. This is things like personal goals, like reading every book club book for the year, fun challenges like Adventures in Aldia and the Year of Goober Challenge, which is the one run by my book club, and then also other challenges which are more personal rather than widespread, so things like my 12 picks from friends and my lists of 25 in 2025. This page will eventually have the covers of the things I'm planning on reading or watching for those challenges, but we're going to do that at the end so I can run you through all of the things that are on my TBR or TBW for the month ahead. Given that setting up this page is really just kind of the decorative elements and putting in the headers for each of the sections, it only took me about 5 minutes to set up, and that time was certainly decreased by using printed headers rather than trying to do this style of lettering myself. If you're interested in the font that I've used, that one's listed in the description box, along with all of the other materials that I've used in the setup. While I do like the idea of pre-planning which pieces of media I'm consuming for each of my challenges, I haven't necessarily done the best job historically of picking the ones that I actually ended up reading. Outside of the book club, because the book club gets picked in advance, I know exactly what that's going to be, and I will definitely be reading it because I do not want to get punished. It's okay, punishment only happens for book club leaders who don't finish the book. If you want to join our book club, you are more than welcome to. You will not be punished for skipping a month. and you can join up using the link in the description box below. This page took about 5 minutes to set up before adding in the covers, and we will be coming back to add them in a little bit later, but flipping over and we're setting up the challenge page for the readathon that I'm joining in April. This one is called the Magical Readathon, hosted by G of Book Roast, and this is going to be my second year participating. This readathon is set up like a roleplay game, where you design a character who's going to be going to a magical academy called Aurelium to study for a particular calling, or effectively a job. The background information in this one is pretty extensive. For instance, we have different school houses or guilds. The world and how magic came to the world has a history, as told in the brief history of Aldia. But the long story short of it, as you design yourself a character, you pick which guild you want to be part of and which calling you want to undertake, and then depending on which calling you're going with, you get given a class list for each of 2 semesters. The one that we're going to be doing in April is the spring 2025 semester, and then in probably September we will have the fall or autumn semester. The spring semester is the easier of the 2. We have less books to read in the spring semester, and how many books and what prompts you're going to be reading for depends on which calling you're doing. For instance, my character is called Rain. She is a dwarf hailing from Kerador, and she is studying to be an Archmage. The Archmage calling means that we have to read 6 books for the spring semester and 8 for autumn, in particular in the learning areas of alchemy, inscription, artificery, spells and incantations, art of illusion, and conjuration. While we're only going to be reading for the spring semester in April, I also wanted a place to summarize the books that I read for the autumn semester last year. While technically the challenge is to read all of the prescribed books in the month that we're at school, so in April or in September, I typically give myself a little bit of leniency with this, because previously when I've done it, I couldn't really be relied on to read that many books in just 1 month. So instead, I consider my spring semester to be from the start of April up until the start of the autumn semester. So April through to the start of September. For the autumn semester then, that would be from the start of September all the way through to the start of the spring semester, or September through to April. It just gives me a little bit more buffer to work with, especially because if I'm reading for very particular prompts, I might not necessarily want to pick up one of those books in the month in question. Plus it is all supposed to just be a bit of fun, and G herself even says we're given pretty much full liberties to do what we want with the reading challenge. To set up my layout though, I've split it into 2 halves, so we have the autumn semester on the left hand side, and then the spring semester on the right, mainly because in my mind like the autumn semester came before the spring semester, so I'm putting that one in first. And on this layout I wanted to have a space to record what each of the books were, either that I have read because they were from the autumn semester, or I'm going to read because they're for the spring semester. The issue here though is that I also wanted to record the prompts that went along with each of those too. For spring, this isn't so much of a big deal because I'm, quote, only reading 6 books for spring, so I can fit those very nicely along the bottom 2 rows of the layout, and then have the prompts in the top row. But for autumn, having 8 books, I can't necessarily fit the prompts and write them out in full just in one box that would be on the layout. If you kind of think about the layout as a 3x3 grid. I just don't really have enough space to fit them into one of those boxes. Instead, what I went with was a tip-in so that I had a little bit of extra space to work on the layout. It did take me a hot minute to figure out how to do this tip-in, and in fact it took quite a few trial and error pieces. I essentially wanted it to be so that when the tip-in was closed, you could see all of the book covers for the things that I've read, and only when you open up the tip-in do you see the prompt list for autumn. I figured it out eventually. It took a little bit of fiddling around with, but I certainly could have done a little bit more pre-planning to make the filming portion of this just a little bit easier. Given the time taken fiddling around with the tip-in, this layout did take the longest to set up in the overall setup for April, coming in at about 17.5 minutes, though that doesn't include umming and ahhing time, which probably added like another 10 or something like that. You'll see though with the prompts that I'm putting in for the autumn semester, they have letters assigned to them as well. So we have like Alchemy O, Alchemy Q, Alchemy D. This is essentially why we end up with more books to read from more prompts in the autumn semester, because we have different levels of completion that we need to do for each of the different classes. The specifics of the different callings and the classes that need to be taken for them and the prompts associated with those classes are all available from G's resource library, and if you wanted to get involved with the challenge, it's going to be a lot of fun. I've got G's intro video to that linked in the description box as well. If this one sounds maybe just a little bit too much for you though, stay tuned because we will have another reading challenge challenge coming up in May that's going to be a little bit more casual, a little easier to participate in, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the announcement video for that one. Closing up the tip-in though so that we can flip on over to the next spread, this is where I'm going to be setting up my page for our book club read and also my pile of possibilities. For both February and March I'd done a full spread for our book club read, and I just found that this was a bit too much space, especially considering I would also do a review page for the book later on in the journal. So that would be like 3 pages dedicated to one read. While following the meeting for our book club books, I do often have enough thoughts to fill up a full page. I don't necessarily have enough to fill up 2 pages, mainly because that 3rd page would be dedicated to just the general information about the book, any discussion questions we were going to ask, and any other relevant statistics I wanted to keep track of. For April, I've decided to simplify this a little bit, so we're just going to have the left-hand side of this spread be for the book club book. On this layout, I'll have some general information about the book, so title, author, and also what the read theme for the month was. Now, as mentioned, I picked the theme of this journal setup to go with the theme that we had for book club, and the prompt that Monica decided on for April was an anticipated autumn release. I have no idea if the winning book is actually going to be set in fall, but I thought it would be fun to style my journal around that book club theme. One of the things that's been super great about book club this year is having more people participating in the voice chat aspect of it. It's been really nice to see how people who have been with us for a while and also new faces are just getting involved in the conversation, sharing their thoughts, and honestly giving me a lot of insights into the books we've been reading. I'm more so the kind of person who, unless I'm reading a non-fiction book, which is typically a self-help book, I don't tend to think too deeply about the books I'm reading. I'm more so just reading them for enjoyment, but I love that through book club and sharing thoughts with other people and hearing their ideas about how they found the book, it's just made me think a little bit more deeply about the things that I've been reading, in particular with reference to book club, but also outside of this as well. As mentioned before, if you would like to join our book club, we would love to have you. We read 1 book per month, which is voted upon by our book club members, and then at the end of the month have a meeting via Discord to discuss our thoughts. You do not actually have to talk in the book club meeting, you can just attend and listen, and we also have a side chat going at the same time, so you can just type out your thoughts as well. It's very chill, it's a good time, and we'd love to have you. Our Discord reading community where it's hosted is linked in the description box. In terms of timing though, the book club aspect of the layout took about 6.5 minutes to set up, and then on the right hand side, this is where I'm going to be putting in my pile of possibilities. This is essentially like a TBR for the month, or what I think of as kind of like a to consume, because it can also include things like movies, TV shows, and games. That one isn't going to take very long to set up at all, because I'm just sticking in the header and putting in a little extra decoration. I figured that with the other reading challenges that I'm doing, both the April specific one being the Magical Readathon, and also my ongoing year-long ones, so the Year of Goober Challenge, Adventures in Aldir, my 25 and 2025, and my friend picks, that's probably enough media, but just in case I want to pick something else up, something that's outside of those challenges, it's nice to have a little bank of options to consult. That's what's going to go on this page. Flipping over though so that we can get into the next spread, I don't typically like orange, to be completely honest, but I think this theme is kind of turning it around for me. I really like how it came together, and I was especially impressed with how the headers laid down so well over the top of the tape that I put on the top of the layout. This is something that I've always kind of shied away from doing because I don't like it when you can see a very obvious outline of the sticker paper around the text, and in my mind it always just blends better on white paper compared to on something colored, but I think I've challenged that thought for myself because I feel like the headers in this setup have done pretty well in blending into the tape. This spread though is going to be my April recap, or effectively like my month in review as far as media is concerned. This setup is pretty much the same every month, and that's because I've been finding it just works well for me. The first section I like to put in is a media breakdown, which is essentially just a spot to say how many of each media type I consumed. So how many books did I read? How many movies did I watch? How many TV show seasons did I finish? And how many games did I play? I normally like to just write the number in to start with, and then put a little bar graph coming off the right hand side of this. I don't go in and put a scale in for that bar graph ahead of time, just because I'm not too sure how many of each I'm going to consume, and I want to make sure that it fits into whatever space I've assigned it to. So in this case, I want to make sure it doesn't interfere with the sticker that I've put next to that section. Underneath this though is where I put in my highlights for the month. So what were my top media pieces? They don't necessarily have to be the ones that I rated the highest, but normally they're ones that have some kind of positive memory attached to them, or they were impactful in some way. For instance, in February, one of my highlights was the Attack on Titan series, not so much because it was a favourite for the month, there were other media pieces that I enjoyed more, but it was a memory-making thing with my partner Vogel. We'd been talking for a while about doing a marathon of the series, and we finally got around to doing it, so it felt like special time that was for us. I give myself enough space to put in 4 highlights, so selecting from any of the media I consumed, not just books, but also movies, TV shows, and games. At the bottom of that left-hand page though, this is where I put in a quote space. This is for anything memorable or meaningful, something that stood out from the pieces of media that I was typically reading more than watching or playing. Mainly because I just find I remember quotes from books better, because as I read, I do highlights. I don't typically do that with things that I watch or play. Thinking about that now though, I might have to change that. I don't have a set number of quotes that I'm looking for, I just fill up whatever space I've designated it to. So in this case, about 11 lines that I've tucked into that corner there. The right hand side of this layout is getting a slight change up compared to what I've done previously, and that's because rather than putting my at a glance summary at the top of the page, instead I'm putting in the sections for my little pie graphs. One of the things that I have always loved about people's reading journals are when they put in little graphs to show their different stats, especially pie graphs. I just think they're so dang cute. So I knew that this year that was definitely something I wanted to include in mine. I have 3 different things that I record pie graphs for. One of them being the formats of my reads. So did I read it as a physical book, a digital book, an audio book, or did I do a mixture? And I've been finding I've been getting a lot more into mixture than I have previously, at least for February and for a bit of March. The next graph I like to include is for genres, and I only track 4 different categories here because I'm not very widely read when it comes to my genres. So the ones that I have are fantasy, romance, self-help, and just other. So anything else that doesn't fit inside those categories, that'll go in that section of the pie graph. So far this year I don't think I've used the other category yet though. The third pie graph though is for ratings, and this is where I give a slice of the pie to whichever ratings I ended up using. I don't typically write out a key for this one in advance, mainly because I'm not necessarily going to use every single value of my rating scale, so I don't want to go and designate, like 11 different colors to a graph that might only end up with 3 segments. That one instead I like to label on the graph which ones are which. A new addition to this rating space though is putting in my average rating. Typically this would be in the at a glance section, but I also normally don't record my at a glance section in 2 separate columns, and there's usually 5 entries. So I wanted to keep the columns equal, so I put the average rating underneath the ratings header. The at a glance section though is coming in at the bottom, and for that one I just record some statistics that are of interest to me, so the number of pages read, the number of minutes watched, and then how many of my books were in a series and how many of them were standalones. You'll see that I don't actually draw in the pie graphs ahead of time either. What I typically like to do is wait until the end of the month so that I have all of my statistics, and then I'll make them digitally, just in Microsoft Word, print them off on sticker paper and stick them in. I always print these ones in black and white so that then I can colour in each of the segments using the pens that I've decided for my colour code. That way I don't have to try and get an accurate colour match from what I see on the computer to what I'm going to print to what I'm going to put in my book. Can be a little bit difficult to get all of those to line up properly. In terms of timing though, from first to final touches, the April recap took about 16.5 minutes to set up. But of course, this is just the base structure. I then have to go and fill it in with information when it comes to the end of the month. Now as the general structure is in though, it's time to flip back and think about what I'm going to be reading for the month. In terms of my challenges, for book club we're going to be reading Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris. For the Year of Goober challenge, I'm going to be reading Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. For my friend pick, I'm going to be watching Twister, a recommendation that came from Vogel. For Adventures in Aldea, I'm going to be reading The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. And then for my 25 in 2025 lists, I have one book, which is Devourer of Men by Nikki St. Crow, and one thing to watch, which is You Season 5. Sticking those ones in here so that I have my challenge accepted page fully set up. This one is technically just a plan. I can swap some of these out if I want to. Not so much the book club book, that one's already set in stone, but the others I could switch. Flipping on over though, I want to plan out what I'm going to be reading for the spring semester and record what I have read for the autumn semester. To do this though, I did first have to go in and write down the prompts for each of these different classes that my character is taking, starting first by opening up my tip-in so that I can write in the autumn 2024 semester classes. For O-level and alchemy, it was chemical breakdown and reading a book that will make you emotional. For Q-level, we had component reconstruction, and this was a book that was traditionally published after being self-published. For alchemy level D, we had culinary transmutation, or a book with food on the cover. And then for inscription level O, we had the art of decipher, which is a title that has all of the letters of your first name. I did take my first name to just be Jess for this because finding one with all of the letters of Jessica proved to be quite difficult for things that I actually was interested in reading. But for inscription level Q, we had ink pigmentation, which was using a color wheel to pick out the title color for the book. For artificery level O, the class was birthstone properties, with the prompt of a book with a cover color of your birthstone. Given that mine is opal, I went with a multicolored stone. But for spells and incantations level O, we had learning a charm, which was dancing stars, and this was reading a 5-star prediction. And then for Q, we were learning a spell called memory clip, and this is a book shown in any one of G's videos. As for the spring semester, for alchemy, our course is going to be about volume magnification, or looking for a title that's written in all capital letters. For inscription, the course focus is the hook, and this is a first sentence challenge. So picking 3 books, looking at the first sentence, and going with whichever book has the best opening line. For artificery, we're looking at clockwork mechanics, so this was checking the time, whether it be AM or PM, and then picking a title length to match the hour. When I was watching the video, it was 9 AM, so I had to find a title with 9 words in it, or 9 letters. I decided to go for words though. For spells and incantations, the spell we're learning is copy-paste, and this is looking for a book with a title that includes a word from the thing you last read. G said this could either be selected at the time of reading for that prompt, or what she recommended was doing it at the time of watching the video, which at that point I had just finished a Lore Olympus book, so I'll give you 3 guesses as to what I picked for that prompt. For the art of illusion though, the course focus is distance manipulation, with the prompt being a book you already planned to read for the month. And then for conjuration, we're looking at locational summons, or using a random country generator, and using it 5 times, and then going with a book from an author that was born in one of those countries. The first one we have is Iron Flame for Alchemy O. For Alchemy Q, we have Lore Olympus Volume 1. And then for Alchemy D, we have The Spell Shop. For Inscription O, we have Sprint, solve big problems and test new ideas in just 5 days. Haven't actually read this one yet, but it's stuck in the journal now, so I better. For Inscription Q, we have House of Bane and Blood. And then for Artificery, we have Feel Good Productivity, How to Do More of What Matters to You. For Incantations O, we've got Fourth Wing. And for Incantations Q, we have Funny Story. With the exception of Sprint, these are all books that I've already read. I still need to read this one before we start the spring semester, but having a look at those ones. For Alchemy, I'm planning to read Devourer of Men. For Inscription, I'm going to read The Love Hypothesis. For Artificery, I'm reading Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. I have Lore Olympus Volume 8 planned for spells and incantations. Strange Beasts for The Art of Illusions. And then The Decapitated Chicken for Conjuration. I have zero idea what this book is about, but my random picker chose Uruguay, so this author was born in Uruguay. Again, this one is just a plan. I won't necessarily read all of these for these prompts. I might switch them out for other things, and I won't necessarily read them all in the month of April. As said, I essentially treat my semesters as being like from the start of April up until the start of the autumn semester, which is in September. So I've got a while to finish these off. A couple of them you have seen were already on my plan anyway though, so hopefully I will get to them in the month of April. Flipping over though, now I need to stick in the covers for the book club read. As already mentioned, this is Strange Beasts by Susan J. Morris, and I can also note down the title, author, and read theme in the sections that I've got on this layout. At the bottom, I also like to stick in a cover for the runner-up, just so that it gets a little bit of space on the page, and for April, the runner-up is Diavola, which there is a non-zero chance that I pronounced that incorrectly. As said, if you want to come and join the book club, it is free to join. The first link in the description box will take you over to our reading community. And even if you don't want to join the book club, we'd still love to have you there as well. The pile of possibilities I'm leaving open for now because I want to get just a little bit closer to the month before I start to think of anything else that I might want to read or watch or play. And in terms of the next layout, being the end of month recap, I don't have anything to stick in here because we are nowhere near the end of April yet. Flipping back though, so that we can flip through, I love how these layouts came together. I do low-key wish that I used this theme in my everyday journal setup because I just love the autumnal vibes. Even though it doesn't feel anything like autumn where I'm based just yet, we should be creeping up to that season soon, so hopefully things will get a little bit cooler for me. If you wanted to check out the other setups and flip-throughs that we've had in this reading journal, then the playlist on screen is where it's at. That one has our previous setups, my reading reviews, and the initial journal setup. So click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.